They tear them apart and eat the nuts out of them.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the remains, the holes.
How are we going to raise this?
Well, back to this business of, first of all, of you guys going out yonder. That's, you know, I always thought, listening to you, that it was in the early 30s when the Depression...
Well, the Depression and I are the same age.
You were born with the Depression.
She brought it on.
He says I brought it on.
It started in 29.
Well, I was born in 28.
And
so
I graduated from high school in 30.
You graduated from high school in 30. So we have a little spread of opinions there. So to you, when did the Depression seem to start back then?
I know what the Depression was. Fortunately, my dad had a dairy, and we had a number of people who bought our milk, and we delivered milk twice a day, morning and evening.
What year was this?
Well, my dad started it in 1920, but you see, the dairy grew so that by 1929 he had a pretty good dairy, and people still had to have milk. And we had one family, if I could remember the name, you might even remember them, although they might have been gone by then. But they had 5 children, and I remember my mother saying to my father, "This family haven't paid their bill." And Dad said, "They can't pay their bill, but they have 5 children. We're going to leave their bill. They're going to get their milk."
And how much was milk back in those days?
Well, 10 cents a quart, probably. 5 cents a pint. Cream was 10 cents a pint, I think. And that's about it. The most that my dad ever charged for milk, and I don't know what years that was 12 cents. The least he ever charged, 12 cents a quart. And the least he ever charged was 8 cents a quart. Now, it could be that during the Depression was when it was 8 cents a quart. I can't say positively, but I know that at one period of time it was 8 cents a quart.
Was your dad able to keep the dairy going through the Depression?
We kept the dairy going. See, and yes, he was able to keep it because there were enough people taking milk who could pay their bills. We didn't have a lot. We never had money for
luxuries,
any extra things. And we raised a lot of our own food. We had chickens as well as the milk, as the dairy, and at one point I think the most cows my father ever had was around 35.
And I'll bet you didn't have any milking machines.
Long in the late 30s, I think it was, that he did get a milking machine, and they didn't like it. Probably in the mid-30s.
The cows didn't like it?
No.
Or your folks didn't like it?
Folks didn't like it. They wanted to keep on milking.
How did your mother preserve the chickens?
Well, I think that mostly, as far as preserving them, I don't know that she ever preserved them. I think we just killed them and ate them as we needed, as she wanted or needed chicken. And we had a big garden. We had a very big garden.
And how big was your family?
9 kids. My mother had 10 children, lost one who would have been a little over a year older than I am. And she died in infancy when she was about 2 months old. They lived out in the country, and she was born in 1911. And when she was about 2 months old, she got whooping cough. Well, they lived out in the country, and there was no way they could save her life. But she's the only one out of 10 children that my mother lost. There were 3 boys and 6 girls, and I had 1 brother older and 1 sister older, and I was 3rd then in the family. And then the other 6 were all younger than I.
So how old were you kids when you began to be part of the milking crew?
Probably 8 years old. I think that although I might have been younger than that when Dad first started milking the cows and bottling the milk. And that would have been in sometime between 1918 and 1920, or in that area somewhere where he started. And then, as I said earlier, when the demand grew, then he had to buy more cows, and we had to move from this place where we lived in town, outside of town, to a larger home and to a larger yard.
Was that milk delivered with trucks?
we had, first I think, besides hand delivering it, walking us children just kind of in the neighborhood, taking these little carriers with the bottles, and we delivered it just down the road. Then later, I think he had a wagon very much like the wagon he had used when he had delivered mail. And I'm not sure whether the first one was horse-drawn. Maybe it was horse-drawn. And then he got one that was with a motor. And it was just like the wagons that they used to deliver mail, and had the name on the side. He called it Marshall's Milky Way Dairy. Mm-hmm. That was the name of it. And he had that on the side of his wagon. And then later, probably in the mid-20s, he bought something else to deliver the milk with. I think that first wagon with the name on it probably lasted about 4 or 5 years. Uh-huh. And then the cars changed, and he had, when I learned to drive, which was in 1926, I think, that I believe I was 14, and that's when I learned to drive, and we had a Pontiac, and I learned to drive with a Pontiac.
Now, Jewel, you said you went to work as a kid. How old and for how much money?
I started out when I was about 12 or 13 mowing lawns with an old reel-type lawnmower. Pushed across town and mowed different lawns. But when I had a steady job, I was 14 years old. The summer I was 14. A little ice house. Had no refrigeration in it. It was just the ice itself kept it cold. And I had a route in the morning. I'd put a 50-pound pack on a block of ice on my shoulder and carry it down the street to some of the businesses. We were just one block off the main square. And then the rest of the day I spent there at the shop from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, $1 a day.
$1 a day. Folks, this day and age have a little trouble understanding that economy, I'll tell you.
Well,
what year was it?
Well, I'd have been 14, so I'd been 42. 1942. 43, I went to work for the Double Cola Company. Gene Jackson owned it. And you had to grab the cases by the necks of the bottles, put them up on there. And the truck driver didn't think I was sturdy enough to do it. When we were married, I only weighed 125 pounds, 6 feet tall. But Gene Jackson also owned a dry cleaners. And so he pulled me off the Double Cola truck and put me in the cleaners. Mm. And my first day on the job, during World War II, one of the tubes blew out in the boiler. Now, how did you had to keep the boiler going in order to clean the clothes, press them and all. So what they had to do is to pull the fire brick out of the back of it, wait until the bricks cooled down enough that I could crawl in the back and plug it. They put a rod through it, they put a washer on each end and a nut, tighten them up, and that's the way they closed it off. And I had that day in July in the back of that, and the bricks were still hot. They weren't burning hot, but they were still warm enough to be very uncomfortable.
Where was this?
In Nevada.
Nevada, Missouri.
Yep. So that was my next job. And I had it about 3 years, and they put a little twin of a girl, brought her in, and she became the boss's plaything and got to be the manager. Now, I'm the one that'd been there 3 years, and so I went to him and I said, look, I have 2 things I want. I want to raise to 35 cents an hour. No way. And I want her off the job, off of my back. No way. I said, goodbye. I went next door, and it was a newspaper, Nevada Daily Mail, delivered in the evenings. I was circulation manager. Yep. What that meant was that if some kid didn't show up to take his route, I had to deliver his papers. Sometimes I'd delivering 2, 3, 4 at a night. But I also had made collections. And this one Saturday morning between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I'm going down Washington Street, which is sort of toward my house. There's a duplex. And a knock on the door on this side, and a gentle little lady, about 5 feet tall or less, came to the door. Oh, yes, just a minute, let me get my purse. And being a musician, you know, I picked up on music very quickly. And I heard music coming from the bed over there. And here sat this blonde teen angel playing an accordion, playing Christmas songs.
Do we happen to know her? I thought maybe that was the one.
You talk about things happening in life. That was one of them. The Lord was standing right there beside me.
Amen.
That's the story.